All right, here we are, another Sunday. It's actually Father's Day, and so it's a blessing for me to be able to connect with my son, Jasper, on Father's Day, and we're doing a little discussion about real estate and just our experiences with running our businesses in North Carolina. We both invest in North Carolina. Jasper lives in Arizona now, but so we're just opening up the discussion. If y'all have any questions or comments or requests for future topics, let us know. But we're gonna jump in here and do any inspiration and education we've had from the past week, and then we'll talk about our businesses a little bit. We got a couple of topics for today, and yeah, hopefully we can bring y'all some value. Did you have any stuff this week, Jasper, that stuck out to you as far as podcasts or books or anything you've learned or been inspired by?
Yeah, definitely. I listened to this one. I don't want to butcher this guy's name. Oh, Michael Saylor. That's his name. I don't know if you've heard of him. I've heard of him, but this is my first time listening to him, and I was really impressed with him and everything about him. So I'll just do a brief synopsis for anyone who might be interested. But basically, he's the largest holder of Bitcoin today, and he believes very strongly in that, obviously. And I don't know his exact age. I'm guessing maybe 60s or so. But he was on Graham Stephan's pod, and so he was basically, I think it was like 3.5 hours, and I'm still not done, but I was listening to it last Sunday, and I was just really impressed with his ability to tell stories and just articulate himself and just his knowledge on everything, which is Bitcoin, obviously, especially, but just finance in general, business in general. He's really into sci-fi, and so he used to read a lot of sci-fi books as a kid, he said, and he still does. And you can tell because he just really is really good at telling stories. And it was really cool because like he would share something about finance or a statistic or something, and Graham would, or Graham's editor or whatever, they would pop it up on the screen while he's talking about it. And like every time he's just doing this off the top, and every stat is absolutely correct every time.
Wow.
And he's just citing stuff from like 1910, like unemployment rate in the 1900s versus the 1800s versus this
Wow.
time and this time. And it was just like incredible, just like incredible. And then like I found out kind of why at the end, which is, number one, he's been in business for like 40 years. But number two, he stepped down as CEO of his company about 2 years ago. And now that's all he does. So all he does is watch YouTube on finance and Bitcoin, read books on finance and sci-fi and Bitcoin, and listen to podcasts on that stuff. He listens to congressional hearings. So he literally listens to congressional hearings, and then he'll read the transcript while he's listening to it. And it's just hilarious. Like he just loves to learn. It's really cool. And obviously like his story is super inspiring too. So I won't go too long, but he owns a company called MicroStrategy. I actually heard about this company around December of last year, and I wish I had done some more research into it because their stock has outperformed every other stock in the market over the last 4 years. And from December, especially when I first heard about it, and I didn't know anything about him, I think their stock was at like $500, and now it's at like $1,600.
Wow.
But like I said, his stock has outperformed all the other stocks, including Apple and Tesla and all those huge companies since 2020. So in the last 4 years, his stock is like, I don't know, more than 10x. And he shared that in 2020, they COVID happened, and they were a large software like tech company is their main business. And so they were doing really well up until that point, and he had $500 million in cash in his business. And when COVID happened, their business really took a big hit, and obviously everyone in their office pretty much left because you couldn't work in office anymore. And so he had like multiple offices, lots of people working there, and everyone left. And so he just saw the writing on the wall, and he was like, well, I can have a slow death, which is just like ride this out and see how long it takes me. I can have a quicker death, and I forgot what he said about the quicker death, or I can make a bet. And so what he did was he bought $250 million worth of Bitcoin, and the rest is history from there. And from then his company was worth about $1 billion, I think, in 2020, and now his company is worth like 50 billion or something crazy like that. And it's just because they're the largest holder of Bitcoin. That's what's increased their stock. His company is still valuable on its own, but because they have that much on their balance sheet with Bitcoin, it's just growing and growing and growing and growing, and he's kept buying and buying and buying. That's what's made their company so much more valuable. So he's winning on all fronts because the Bitcoin's going up, his company stock's going up, and like everything's just going up and up and up. It's really cool. But he made some great points just talking about Bitcoin and how it can change the world, and just like he made some points about like, wouldn't it be awesome to be able to transact on a Saturday? Like, why can we not transact on the weekends? Like, it just makes no sense to be such an advanced civilization and we can't transact on federal holidays and we can't transact on a Saturday or Sunday. Like, it just makes no sense.
Yeah.
And so he made a lot of good arguments for it, and definitely, had me sold on Bitcoin by the end of the podcast. But I was really just inspired by how he articulated himself. Literally didn't take a sip of water for 3 hours, and he's just spewing all this knowledge off the top of his head. So I was just impressed with that. It was really cool. But yeah, I think that's. Oh no, this other one I want to share with you. I'll send this to you right now, actually, because this was awesome. So Alex shared this. I guess it was like I don't know what it was, like a day of a mastermind or something. But basically, he had I think 10 or 12 entrepreneurs come out to his office in Vegas, and I don't know how they got in. I think because they're doing workshops now that you can apply for on his website. So maybe that's what it is. But either way, it was all these different companies, and he just shared like this long video of them asking him all their questions. So it was super, super cool. And one of the dudes was a wholesaler. So it was awesome. Because I always wondered like what would Alex's advice be to like a wholesaler?
A
And
lot of his advice is for other types of businesses. Yeah.
yeah. And so, of course, his advice was extremely simple. And, I probably could have come up with it myself. But this dude is in Missouri. And I think he did 2 point something million, I think 2.5 million or somewhere around there last year. And she was asking Alex how to grow. And Alex was like, well, who's the biggest wholesaler in the nation? And he was like, well, probably like home investors, like the We Buy Ugly Houses people. And he was like, okay, well, what do they do? And he was like, well, they do a lot of advertising, like billboards and TV and just every channel. And he was like, okay, well, maybe we should do that. And that was pretty much it. That was pretty much it. So that was kind
It's
of
kind
like
of
a
an
bummer.
oversimplification.
Yeah, it was kind of a bummer for me because I was expecting like something, but at the same time, that's what it comes down to. And that was his advice to pretty much everyone, which is just like look at the biggest player in your space and just copy them if you want to be the biggest player in your space. And so, it's very
Yeah, but what
simple,
if you don't
but
want to be the biggest player in your space? That's the thing,
yeah, yeah. And so
He
that was
is really
something.
geared toward ramping up.
Yeah, that was something I wanted to share with you, and then I'll wrap up. But that wholesaler, all he does is foreclosures, so that's it. He doesn't even do marketing. So literally, all they do is do pre-foreclosures, and they just pull them from the county or from Zillow and whatever, and that's it. Like they don't do mass text or mass calling or anything. They just have a really small team, and they just call foreclosures and pre-foreclosures, and that's it. So that was inspiring for me that you can just do that and get to 2.5 million, because that's a lot more than what I'm doing. So that was
Yeah.
inspiring. And there was some good advice to the other businesses as well, that could apply to us. But yeah, that's it for me. I'll stop there.
Nice. Thanks for sharing those.
Yeah.
I made a note here so we can put them in the show notes. Um, I can't remember consuming any real estate or business related stuff this week. And sometimes the week goes by so fast, I don't always remember everything. But I shared on the last podcast, I got a puppy this last week. So I've had her for just over a week. And so a lot of what I've been consuming is dog training and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So I've been listening to an ebook. Jasper, you might remember the monks of New Skete when we had Molly. There's a monastery in upstate New York, and it's New Skete, and there's these monks that have been training German shepherds and breeding German shepherds for like 50 years now, and they have like a training method that really is about being a partner with the animal. Like they have best-selling books like The Art of Being Your Dog's Best Friend, or The Art of Training Your Puppy, that kind of stuff. So that's one of the books I've been reading this week, Art of Training Your Dog.
Nice.
But and my puppy's a Belgian Malinois, so she's like a shepherd. So anyway, that's where my brain has been when I've not been working. Otherwise, I've been working with concepts. I've been doing a lot of like reassessing the business this week. So I have been reviewing my strategic coach stuff, which is, when we're trying to get someplace in business, when I'm trying to get someplace in business, which in my case is self-managing business, which is, it's an idea. It's not just exclusive to strategic coach and Dan Sullivan, but it's one of the things he teaches. And one of the reasons I'm in strategic coach is to get the business to a point where it's self-managing. And so I've been looking at that, and I've been looking at who, not how. It's like, not rather than how will I get this done, it's who is the right person to support, the next
Uh-huh.
steps for my business to get to where I want it to be. So as I've been like crunching numbers and looking at projections and how we're going to grow the business and how we're going to be profitable, this discussion we had last week in the podcast of profitability versus just going big, or going for a big number, and
Yeah.
like how to really maximize efficiency and output with the team that we have, and then growing it consciously. Like that's like a who, not how discussion too. And I've been grappling with that a lot, just like the whole who is the person to be next person to add to the team, and even who's on the team that maybe could be in a different position or maybe it's not right for the team, like all these things.
Yeah.
So there's those concepts I've been working with this week, and the thing that Matt said, Matt Larson said on one of our masterminds about having an A team and always looking for like the person that's the weakest link on the team, or the person that's not fitting, or the person who is adding complexity rather than adding simplicity or making things easier. And those are all the types of things I've been drawing from this week as I've been working on the business rather than in the business. So
Hmm.
that's what I've got
That's awesome.
for now. Yeah.
Sweet.
So yeah, for our next segment, normally we'll just alternate doing a business check-in. I don't know. How do you want to do topics, Jasper? You want to do those after we do KPIs, or you want to do them before?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we just do a brief business
Yeah.
check-in, and then we could do some shared topics.
Yeah, we check in about our business, like victories and challenges and like KPIs, but KPIs are different for everybody. You'll see when Jasper and I check in, like he generates a whole lot more leads and makes a lot more offers than I do, but we just have a different approach and we focus differently and we get really good results, but different numbers. So I
Yeah.
think KPIs don't matter. It doesn't matter. It's just, I think the most important thing is that your KPIs for your business, your key performance indicators, and what you're trying to hit, and that you review them frequently so that like, for example, offline, Jasper, you said a wholesaler said we have a 50% contract to close rate. That means, if you want to close 5 deals every month, you got to get 10 contracts, right?
Yeah.
If that's your contract to close rate. So just knowing things like that is important more than what the actual numbers are as far as leads and stuff. So
Yeah.
I'll just throw that out there. But yeah, I'll give the floor to you, Jasper, to check in about your business for the week and anything you've got going on with KPIs or closed deals or anything you want to share.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a great point you shared, because I know typically we share like leads generated, offers made, contracts signed, deals closed, stuff like that, or how many deals we sold as well. And for people who might be listening or watching, that might not be helpful, because like he said, everyone's KPIs are going to be totally different. And we could maybe change, and share different KPIs, because I think the KPIs that can be kind of shared is like, how many leads does it take you to get a contract? Like, that's something everyone can shoot for. Matt says that about 1 in 30 is a good target to shoot for. And so that's something that's kind of universal. But if you're doing like inbound leads like PPC, they might be hotter. So then you might be like 1 in 10. So even that is kind of, market specific or marketing specific. But I think like contracts to or leads to contracts, and then obviously what, like you shared, contracts to close deals. 50% is not a very good number. I think you want to shoot for at least 70, maybe 80 or 90% if you can. And then cost per lead and cost per closed deal is very important too. So those are metrics that we don't usually share on here, but maybe we could in the future. So
Yeah, and ROI too. What's your return on investment? How much are you spending for
yeah,
your marketing, and then how much are you making, per interval, however you're calculating your interval, whether it's a campaign or whether it's a quarter or a week or a month,
yeah,
like how much money are you spending to get your leads, and then how much are those leads generating in terms of revenue. Sometimes you have to track that over a period of time,
yeah,
but are you getting 4 times your spend? Are you getting 5? Are you getting 2, 10? That's important too.
yeah. Yeah, so maybe we could start sharing that instead of the KPIs that we typically share. So if anyone wants us to switch things up, just leave us a comment and we'll definitely change things up next time. But for this week, I'll just do it how we've been doing it, just for a brief check-in, and then we can do our topics that we were talking about. So for this week, for me, we got 3 contracts. We sold 4 deals this week, so that's awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, we kind of got out of some of the log jams that we had in dispo, sold 4 deals, and like I shared offline, ended up canceling 2 deals, which is it's good. You know, it's a win overall to cancel a deal because we're no longer wasting the seller's time and also no longer wasting our time on deals that aren't going to pan out. So overall, it's a victory, even though it's difficult to do. So yeah, so 3 contracts, sold 4 and closed 1 this week. And then in terms of leads and offers,
Nice.
yeah, in terms of leads and offers, we got 157 leads and put out 103 offers this week. So that is awesome. And going forward, I'm probably going to do hopefully more leads and less offers because I'm going to focus on making my buy box a little bit more targeted and just focusing on the highest value opportunities for me so that I can hopefully do fewer, bigger deals. I kind of got away from that this year. So just say that out loud for myself. But yeah, so yeah, that's my check-in for the KPIs, and I could do a brief deal check-in, and then we can switch it over so we can get to our shared topics. But this was a deal that I was actually pretty proud of our team on this one because we got this contract. Well, I can share where it came from first. So this was actually from Driving for Dollars. So it's always
Nice.
fun. It's always fun to close a deal from Driving for Dollars because that's me from years and years and years ago, like putting in the work myself, driving around and pounding the streets. And it's just fun. It's fun. It takes me back every time I close a deal from those
Yeah.
lists. And you know, funny enough, here we are, probably 3 years later, you know, because I haven't lived in North Carolina for 3 years. So 3 years later, and we closed probably 1 deal per quarter from Driving for Dollars. And that's just an old list that's getting recycled over and over. And we're still closing probably 1 deal per quarter. So it's really cool. For anyone listening, that's, you know, still the most powerful list. And if I lived there, I would still do it every week. So, but
Yeah,
anyway,
there's nothing like driving through a neighborhood and seeing a house with an overgrown lawn and,
yeah,
moss on the roof or falling
yeah,
down trees in the yard or on the roof or whatever it is, it's like, it's pretty obvious
yeah,
that person's probably out of state or out of the area, and, that house is set to pop at some point.
yeah. Yeah, and so this is actually from December of 2022 is when this campaign was initially launched, because when I moved out here, which was at that time, I went through all my Driving for Dollars lists. I combined it into one massive list, and then I remarketed to all of them. And so this was from that campaign way back in 22. And so from doing that campaign, it took all the way until March 30th of this year to even get this lead in our system. So we were marketing to him for 2.5 years. And then, or maybe that's 1.5 years, sorry, 1.5 years. And then he came into our system March 30th, and we followed up with him for a bit. We actually lost the deal technically, like in the beginning. And so for anyone listening, very important, Matt also talked about this week, but anytime a seller tells you their property is sold, make sure you like notate that in your CRM, but do not mark them as dead ever. Unless you go on Zillow and you see the property is sold, then it's done. Then you can mark it as dead. But if they just tell you, oh, I sold the property, always make sure you follow up in 2, 3, 4 weeks, because most of the time when they say they sold, that just means they're under contract. And as we just shared, a lot of people are 50% contract to close. So a lot of those are going to fall out. And so, of course, in our business, we do that. And every time it's sold, we do sold, and then automatically we'll set a follow-up for us in 3 to 4 weeks. And so that's what we did with this one. And he came back around. So his buyer backed out on him. And he was getting ready to move to the Pacific Northwest, so big move for them, and they were going into foreclosure. So unbeknownst to us at the beginning, but they were going into foreclosure. So when this other person went under contract with them and kind of wasted a bit of their time, it became even more motivated. So originally this guy was asking 300,000 for his property, and obviously we were way off on that one. I think we initially offered 260 and he was at 300. And so he was like, nope, I sold it to someone else for a higher offer. We're like, okay, no problem. And then we followed up with him, and we ended up locking it up for 266 just a few weeks later. So he came down over 30,000 because, kind of their backs were against the wall. They had to They had to move, and they were also in pre-foreclosure. And so we got it under contract on, which date do we get our contract? We got under contract on May 29th, and their foreclosure date is set for tomorrow, which is, I think that's the 17th. So it's kind of a tight timeline. We're about 2.5 weeks that we needed to close this thing. So thankfully the seller was super great to work with, and we let him know up front. We're like, hey, like we can get this done for you, but we need you to cooperate and like move quickly with us. And so he was awesome. He let us in for photos the very next day. He let us in for walkthrough multiple times. And I let the buyer know as well, like, hey, like we really need to close this on Friday, this past Friday, and like there can't be any delays because they're literally getting foreclosed on Monday. Like it was set to go to auction on Monday. And so thankfully everything went smoothly, and the lender funded and everything, and we recorded all on closing day, which is very rare in this business. So, so it was awesome. It felt like a huge victory. And not only that, but we're going to give these guys a week after closing to, be able to move all their stuff because they're moving cross country. So it's a big move. So it was just awesome all around. The seller was great. The buyer was great. He closed on time, and he's giving them a week after closing, so they can get paid, and then they can move all their stuff out. So yeah, it feels like a great deal all around. And I don't deal with too many of those foreclosures, but it felt really good to be able to help him out. And it's kind of stressful at the same time because you don't want them to lose their house on your account. But it was awesome that we were able to get it closed. So that's my story for the week.
That's a great story. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tight timeline to get that all done.
Yeah.
And also an excellent point to emphasize of like, people will tell you their property's sold all the time. Sometimes they will tell you the property's sold just to get you off their back. And
Yep.
because they've figured out that all these people who are cold calling, if they tell them it's sold, they'll stop getting so many calls.
Yep.
So it could be what Jasper said, that they went under contract with somebody who's not actually going to close with them, or it could be just something they say to get you off their back. So always good to verify that it's actually sold using Zillow, or we use PropStream or PropWire as a free property, research service. Anything, you can go to the public records on the county, see if it's actually changed ownership. And if it hasn't, then keep them in your system, keep following up until, they tell you it's sold again, and you check again, like maybe it didn't record yet, but at least half the time, people tell you it's sold, it's not. So
Yeah,
don't
definitely.
that as Jasper said, don't mark your deal dead because somebody said it's sold, because it
Definitely.
may not be. And you just made a nice check on a deal that somebody told you was sold. So if you hadn't followed up, that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, definitely.
You got anything else for your business check-in? Any victories or challenges or anything?
I'll just share briefly, kind of piggybacking on the sold thing, but one thing that Matt shared this week that was kind of like a duh moment for me, but it was just like, as well as the sold deals, make sure you go back through all of your dead deals, like deals that, like I canceled 2 deals this week. I shared that. And I realized when he said that on Tuesday that I was totally ignoring those. So we do a great job with the sold of not listening to that objection. But with the dead deals, I just had all these deals sitting in dead that were deals I canceled that I couldn't sell. And I never put them back into follow up. So they were just sitting there. And so I literally went back through, there was like 100 deals in there over the years, and most of them had sold, sadly. And most of them had sold for less than what we had under contract for. So it's totally my fault for not following up, because the only reason I'll cancel a deal is if I go for a reduction and they don't take it. So that's when I'm like canceling a market dead. But a lot of those deals sold for less than what I went under contract with them on. So they did accept a reduction from someone else, and might have accepted it from me just at a later date if I had
Right.
followed up.
Yeah. I
So
mean, once they figure out they're not going to get what they hope to get for it, and they
yeah,
get lower offers from multiple buyers, then they realize this is what the market for my property is, and they take that deal. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I think Matt shared for him, like the magic number was 60 days after you cancel is typically when someone comes to their senses. They're like, okay, I need to reduce my price. And so it was kind of a bummer for me to go back through all those because, like I said, at least half of them had already sold for a cheaper price. But the other half I put back into follow up, and hopefully I'll probably get some deals from those. So that's just something I need to implement, and I already did. But for anytime a deal goes dead, I'm just going to do the same thing as sold, and we're just going to have a monthly follow up. Anytime we mark the deal as dead that we have to cancel. So that was another good thing. It might be valuable for anyone listening who's not doing that.
Yeah. It's a great point. And obviously Jasper has Podio for his CRM. Like, I don't know if you're new, you might not have a CRM yet, so you're gonna have to keep this in Google Sheets or something like that. But
Mm-hmm.
once you have the budget to get a CRM, definitely get a CRM. If probably a lot of people already have them, but we both use Podio. I've used Forefront. There, a dozen CRMs out there, customer relations manager. Is that what that
Yeah.
stands for?
Yeah.
But then you can automate a lot of these follow-ups and stuff, which is nice. And if you have, like, even if you're using SMS, you can automate follow-ups in Launch Control or Smarter Contact. One of these SMS platforms will allow you to automate those follow-ups to save you
Mm-hmm.
from having to remember everything. But you do have to set it the first time of like, oh, I'm going to go through this list. I'm going to take these people and put them in, and they're going to get followed up on in 60 days or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's a good point. You got anything else before we switch over?
No, I think that's yeah, that's about it.
All right, I've been trying to pull my stuff off my phone here. Everything's in Slack and it's easy for me to look at it on my phone. Um, well, I think the biggest KPI, I try and tell my team the most important KPI in our business is closed deals, right? If we don't close
Yeah.
deals, nothing's happening. So the lights don't stay on, nobody gets paid. So everything feeds that number one KPI of closed deals. And so we closed one this week, which is, it's great. I was trying to look that up really quickly and see if I could figure out anything about that. Um, that came from an SMS campaign from May. Yeah, so it wasn't that long ago. And then we closed it. It was originally supposed to close June 5th, and we had some delays with multiple signers and things like that. So we finally closed it this week. But
Nice.
yeah, I don't think there's anything major that I can think of on this one, but the buyer came from Facebook Marketplace, which we try not to do, but sometimes we do end up going to Facebook Marketplace as a last resort because
Mm-hmm.
then you get a lot of people coming in and not everybody's serious. But it does work to sell deals, so if you haven't tried Facebook Marketplace, it's a great way to sell a deal. If you have tried your buyer list and tried, other methods, Facebook groups are even better than Facebook Marketplace, I think, because they're more targeted. But
Yeah.
and post it on Facebook Marketplace, and you will get interest. And we've sold a lot of deals to buyers from there. But yeah, anyway, I'm not going to belabor that one. I don't have a lot with that. So yeah, let me check my solds really quickly and see what we sold. I don't think we sold anything this week. We've got a lot in the works. No, we did. We sold one really fast, actually. We got the contract this week and it sold this week.
Nice.
It's really nice when you get a property. This was a piece of vacant land, but we have a VIP buyer in that area who buys a lot of land. We have actually a couple VIP buyers in this area, but we sent it out to both of them and they both wanted it. So that's a good problem to have. But we sent it to our two VIP buyers in this one area, and they both got back to us and said they wanted it, but the one guy got back to us first. And the second guy, the guy who was slower on the draw, was also the guy who caused us some heartache last week. I checked in about a deal where the buyer ghosted us for a little while. Oh, it was the JV with you, Jasper?
Yeah.
It was the guy who ghosted us and like was incommunicado for a week or so.
Yeah.
Um, who's also always been a great buyer, but I was like, hey, if we're going to give it to one of these guys, let's give it to the guy who didn't ghost us for a week and delay us.
Yeah.
So we ended up giving it to that guy and sold it for full price within like we sent it to him. He signed the contract the next day. So that was
Awesome.
great. Yeah, always good. But so we had one sold this week. And then we had let me check my contracts really quickly. Contracts. June 10th is June 10th this week. Yeah, June 10th we got one vacant land, and then June 13th we got another vacant land. So we got two contracts this week. And then we did 34 leads plus the cold caller, which is usually 15 to 20, but I don't get that data until Monday. So probably like close to 50 leads this week, 30 offers sent out. And then we talked about canceled. We canceled, I think, 3 this week. We had to look at our dispo, and this is a challenge we talked about last week, but we had 20 or more properties in disposition, and some of them were dead weight. So we
Yeah.
tried to go through this week, and I think we ended up canceling 3 deals this week, and we probably will cancel 1 or 2 or 3 more next week. And same as you, Jasper, we
Yeah.
might
Same
have to
here.
go for what?
I said same here.
Yeah. go
Yeah.
for a price reduction this week or cancel on a couple of these deals. So
Yeah.
that's always a bummer. It's not a fun conversation to have with the seller. We want to do our best by the sellers and try and follow up and close when we can, but we can't always do it. So, you know, that's part of the business, but it can be painful.
Yeah.
But it's also painful to have 20 deals in disposition and have a bunch of dead weight and not know where to focus. And you don't want to be stringing sellers along either. If you can't close it, then let them know so they can do whatever their next thing is.
Yeah.
Especially if you want a chance to do business with them in the future, potentially, you don't want to drag it along.
Yeah.
And there's like a lesson we learned with one of our cancellations too. We had I think I'm done with KPR, so I'll just go into the lessons for a second. 30 offers. Yeah. One of our cancellations was this guy who was one of these driver type personalities as a buyer. And I mean, as a seller, and he got his own lawyer, and then the lawyer started being a driver with us too, and like bugging us and bugging the closing attorney about when we were going to close, are we on schedule, all this stuff. And
Yeah.
it was a property. And the other red flag on this property for us was that we had it under contract for, no, we had a verbal agreement for 80,000 and we sent him the contract. And then before he signed the contract, he said, I have another buyer. I need to get at least 90. And so we looked at our numbers and we are like, okay, we can still make money on this. So we did 90. But then it turned out in the process of inspections and talking to buyers about it, like, oh, there's a little bit of a foundation issue and the front porch has kind of fallen off the building. And, so that 10,000 would have really helped us to try and
Yeah.
sell it. And meantime, this guy's driving. Because he was such a driver, my acquisitions person asked me if we could do a due diligence period, which we don't normally do. Normally in our contract, like we can back out right up to closing and receive our EMD back. So the lesson here was we failed and we end up having to pay this guy $500 because we agreed to a 15-day due diligence. Somehow everyone on the team was not paying attention to the fact that we needed to either cancel or have a buyer, within 15 days. And so we let it drag on longer than 15 days. And then we canceled it, like three weeks in. And so then the guy, being a driver type personality, is like, well, I want that $500. I want that earnest money, and
Yeah.
the lawyer is coming out and threatening us and, with lawsuit and judgment for $500. And so it just got to be really annoying. And because we did that, because we changed our contract, changed our process, because we have a driver personality, we raised our price from what he verbally agreed to in the first place. All these things are red flags. Like when somebody's coming in and saying, I want $10,000 more after they've already agreed to a price, maybe it's time to say, oh, okay, well, go ahead and go with the other buyer,
Yeah.
and when somebody's like, oh, I got to have you can't have, well, no, we just don't do deals that way. Our due diligence lasts right up until closing. That's just the way we work. Sorry, like
Yeah.
stuff like that. Because now I have to send this guy $500, and just because he was such a jerk in the process, I don't want to send him $500, but I'm legally bound to do it, so I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
But it's just a lesson. So maybe don't change your process for people. Even it's hard sometimes because you want the contract, you want to do the deal, but I'm learning more and more that if somebody is being difficult early on in the process, it's probably not somebody I want to work with, whether it's a buyer or a seller. And it might be a good time to just pull the rug out and just be like, or like in basketball, you lean up against somebody and you pull the chair out, then they push their weight against you, let them
Yeah.
fall down when you're trying to box out. It's just that kind of thing of like, okay, I'm going to pull the chair out, and you can fall down and see if you still want to do business with me after. But
Yeah.
um, because if you call their bluff and say, okay, well, go ahead with your other buyer, then maybe they do, but probably it's the same scenario as what you said earlier. The other buyer doesn't close at 90 because they find out there's a
Yeah.
foundation issue and a porch thing and, all this stuff. Um, so anyway, I just wanted to share that. And then we had a couple of topics we were just going to touch on briefly before we wrap this up. One of the things we were talking about offline before we got on is like how you protect your deals from basically thieves, right? People whose business model is to get the address of your property and then try and research the seller and communicate with them and offer them a lower price than you're offering, and then try and steal your deal. So they let us do all the work and then they try and steal it later on. So it's
Yeah.
unscrupulous people, but there's a lot of money to be made. So there are seemingly lots of people out there who are willing to be ethically questionable in order to make money. So, and the reason this is a topic is because we had one of these this week where we have a property under contract and it's an out of state seller and we have lockbox on it. And we've sent 4 people over there, and one of those 4 people reached out to the seller and asked them, what their price was for the property, and told them they had the key to the property, which I don't know why they would do that, but that's what they did. So maybe, it's just, why would you even say that to a seller when you're trying to go around the other person? But anyway, so it's frustrating and annoying, and we're just trying to get to the bottom of it. And so then that brought up this topic of like, how do we guard against this? So I guess I can kick it off, Jasper, and you can fill in. One of the first things we talk about that we've talked about on the show before is a memorandum of contract, which works a small percentage of the time, but at least sometimes it'll protect you. The other thing is vetting your buyers and working with people or if you don't know them, trying to reach out to other investors in your circle to see if they've done deals with this person, to see if they're a person of integrity before you give them the address and the lockbox to your property. We vet people that we don't know just by asking questions like, hey, tell me a little bit more about your business. How many deals are you doing? What do you plan to do with this property? Or even asking for proof of funds, which will weed out a lot of people, because if it's a wholesaler who's maybe unscrupulous and trying to steal deals, they're probably not going to be able to send you a bank statement with cash in there to buy the deal, which a lot of builders won't even think twice about, or builders or flippers, will be just like, yeah, sure, here's a proof of funds. So that's one way you can protect yourself.
Yeah.
And the other way that we've talked about is just not posting your address or giving your address until you feel like the buyer is a solid person. And Jasper, you talked about this at the top, offline a little bit, about how it does slow you down a little bit, because some buyers who are professionals will get annoyed when you try and make them jump through too many hoops before you give them the address or give them the ability to walk through the property. But the converse of that is, if you give everybody the address and the ability to walk through your property, you're opening yourself up to much more risk of somebody stealing your property. So it's a little bit of a catch-22, but
Yeah.
I would tend to err on the side of making people jump through hoops and making sure you know who you're dealing with and that they are professional, that they're actually doing deals. Maybe if you don't know them, somebody that like sometimes I ask Jasper, hey, Jasper, have you ever done any deals with this buyer? Because he's reaching out about our property, and maybe Jasper's done a deal with him. He's like, yeah, that's a good guy. I've closed deals with him.
Yeah.
Or, Jasper or somebody else I know might say, oh, I've never heard of that guy. I don't know, and then even like if it's somebody that's coming to us through a Facebook group or a Facebook marketplace ad, you can look on somebody's Facebook profile and you can look and see what it looks like. Like, does this person look like a real person who's actually, just doing business, or does it look like somebody who's kind of weird or off kilter, or, like
Yeah.
some people's Facebook profiles are really weird,
Yeah.
or they have one post up there or no posts, or, and some people you look on and it's like, they do real estate deals, they have a family, they're involved in their church, like, oh, that's a normal, good person that I probably would do a deal with. And even then you don't know for sure, but at least something you could look them up on LinkedIn, that kind of stuff, if you don't have any firsthand reference. So
Mhm.
those are some of the things I can think about. What did I miss in terms of like trying to protect your deals from thieves, Jasper?
I think you pretty much covered, pretty much everything you could do like after the contract. And, I agree with you. I don't think I'm going to change my process right now because, for a few reasons. Because number one thing that Matt shared is like, just if you do have an address to a property, let's say it's either owner occupied or tenant occupied. I have about 2,000 buyers on my list right now, and only half of them open the email, so I only have 1,000. But imagine 1,000 people, let's say just 10% get the address and drive by the property on the same day. Like, imagine as a tenant or an owner occupied person, 100 cars going by your house in a day or a week. That's stressful. That's weird, and that's cause for concern. Even if they don't get out and try to steal your deal, just 100 people riding by, like that's scary almost,
And that's like in a normal neighborhood, right? Like we've had deals
Yeah.
that are down a gravel road or out in the country, and
Yeah,
like if
exactly.
somebody drives down your long driveway or your
Yeah.
gravel road where there's only 2 houses, and you're
Yeah.
like, what the hell are all these people doing on my private road?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And in that case, maybe even only 3 or 4 or 5 people would raise a huge red flag for the seller if it's a more rural type property,
yeah,
So that's the one thing I thought about, and one thing that makes me feel good about not sharing the address, because it's just not disturbing the people that are living there. And whether it's owner occupied or tenant occupied, you need to keep a good relationship with them to get a deal closed. So if you're having all these people drive by their house, even like I said, if they're not getting out and bothering them, it's still bothering them just by all this traffic going by their property. So that's one reason that I like.
You will get calls too. You'll get calls from the seller,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
hey, what are all these people doing out at my house? You said you were going to
yeah,
do 1 or 2 inspections, or the tenants will be calling the seller and the seller will be like, my tenant's blowing me up about all these people going by the house.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you will get
exactly.
calls, and it fractures your trust with the seller, and it's, not a good situation overall.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's one benefit of not sharing the address. Number two is that, like you shared, even though unfortunately someone tried to go behind you, at least you have a small list of exactly who you gave the address to. So now you know, even though they still went around you, it's annoying, but now you know exactly, okay, it's one of these 5 people or one of these 10 people, and you can easily go down the whole list, call them all up, and you can probably find out who did it, And that doesn't necessarily solve the problem if they stole your deal, but at least you can remove them in the future and never do business with them, and you can blacklist them off your internal, CRM. So that's another thing. You have direct control over who has the address, and you can go back and look if anything were to happen. And then number three that I've noticed, and I've just been thinking about while we're talking through this, that I shared with you before we jumped on, but um, it's definitely shrunk down my buyer pool in terms of people who are interacting, reaching out to me for the address. But one thing I've noticed is that these are all the most serious buyers. And in most cases, ironically, these are the buyers that I've been doing deals with for 5 years. And these are people that are big players in the space. Like I shared, Chris is one of them. And these are people who have been buying deals for 5 years. And so they're very serious. And so on one hand, I might lose some serious investors who are like, oh, I'm too good for this wholesaler. I'm not going to give him like the time to even ask for the address. But on the other hand, I've noticed that most of the people reaching out are serious buyers who just want to buy deals. And so they don't have a problem shooting me a quick text because at the end of the day, it takes you 5-10 seconds to shoot me a text or reply back to the email. So you might lose, a percentage of buyers who are like, oh, I'm not going to do that, just because he won't share the address. But you might also just find that the people that are reaching out to you are the most serious, buyers who are going to buy the deal. So that's what I've noticed just looking back at who's reaching out to me. These are people who I've been hearing from for years. So yeah, those are just my points on that. And then I think you shared, everything you can do like after you get the contract. The only thing that I could probably share is to just address it before you even get the contract or as soon as you get the contract. So one or the other. You could have your acquisitions address it like as they're going through the walkthrough of the contract, or immediately after. You could have your acquisition or TC reach out to them and just let them know, like, hey, this is how our process works. By the way, we are in a very hot real estate market, and I'm sure you're going to be receiving multiple calls on your property between now and closing. Is there any reason that you would go with someone else when we have a signed contract right here? Like just addressing it right up front before you even market the property or anything, and see what kind of seller you're dealing with. Because for two reasons, because number one, like you said, do you really want to do business with someone who might be like squirmy at the beginning? Like, let's say you bring that up to them and they're like, oh, well, if I get a better offer, everything's for sale for the right price. Like if it's one of those people, maybe you just want to cut them loose right there, because maybe it's not
Yeah.
even worth it. Because you don't want to do business with someone who's going to even act like that, even if it doesn't come to that. Maybe you just want to cut them loose right away. Or maybe they're like, oh, I would never do that. Some people say like, my word is my bond, and some people are very, very like truthful and straightforward, and they're not going to ever do that. And so you can just address it right away. So that's the only other point I would bring up, because we addressed everything you can do after the contract with the buyer side, but on the seller side, you can just be forthright with them and see, what the reaction is to that when you bring it up. So
Yeah, it's a great point. It's like something we're working with in our acquisitions department is like anchoring that seller, or cementing your relationship with the seller by asking questions such as that, like, hey, is there any reason this deal wouldn't, any reason you'd back out? You can see yourself not following through on this deal or whatever,
yeah,
just drilling down on that.
yeah,
Because I love the point you made of like, some people will be like, oh, maybe so, and some people will be
yeah,
like, absolutely not. And
yeah.
the thing that does psychologically when somebody says, like one of my favorite books is Influenced by Robert Cialdini, and when somebody says something about themselves, then they're even more dug in to prove
Hmm.
that's true about themselves. So if somebody says, absolutely not, I would never if I have a contract with you, I'd never go back on it. Then
Yeah.
they're more locked into that, you know,
Yeah.
where, and then if somebody offered them a couple thousand more, they'd probably be less likely to do it if you've asked them that question and anchored that with them.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
All right. Well, it's an ongoing problem, you know, and more wholesalers are coming in because YouTube University is there and teaching everybody who's done 5 wholesale deals wants to be a guru and teach everybody else how to wholesale,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I'm exaggerating, but there are a lot of gurus out there now. Um, so yeah, so other than that, we talked about I don't know how much else we want to go into these other things, but we had a little bit of discussion about how investor base is working for us because we said we'd touch back on that,
Mhm.
SMS trends and what's going on with that. You mentioned the buy box. I think that's a good thing to think about and maybe just, you know, spend a minute talking about that. Then market trends, you know, this is North Carolina. We could talk about what we're seeing in our market. Um, and those are the only other topics I think we had. So you want to why don't we just touch on investor base because we recommended this and we're not affiliates or anything, even though maybe we should be because we're going to be recommending it a lot, I think. Maybe we
Yeah.
can get an affiliate code for that. But we could touch on we both just started up with investor base like what, a week, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, probably
So
about 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
yeah, and so for you, those of you who don't know, it's just it's a software that's fairly new on the market, but it's for finding investors in an area where you have a deal, and it's pretty cool. And uh, I think we both really enjoyed it. What's your experience been, Jasper, so far with that?
Yeah, I've enjoyed it so far. Like I was sharing before we jumped on, it seems like all the buyers that I've spoken to from InvestorBase. Well, first of all, when I've been searching up these deals, I've noticed that it's maybe 10% of people that I already know and are already on my list, but it's a lot of buyers that I've never heard of before. And so that's really refreshing and exciting for me. So that's number one. Point number one is that these do seem to be a lot of buyers that are somehow I'm missing on my channels that I've been doing trying to find buyers. So that's exciting. And
Yeah,
then number two, reaching out to these people, the overwhelming majority have been super friendly and super real, like buyers who are interested. And with the deals I'm reaching out to, they're going out to their, you know, as soon as they can, checking out these deals, giving me offers. So it's been good. They seem like real active buyers. And I had a few people that are like not interested at all. I guess they don't like working with wholesalers, but the overwhelming majority, probably 90%, 80, 90% have been very interested and very professional and good people. So that's been exciting for me. And then, yeah, the last thing I shared that I want to implement going forward is that you can use this kind of as an acquisition tool when you're kind of on your later stages of a deal, like once you're confident and stuff. Just plug it into InvestorBase, see what the investor activity is there. And I haven't decided like what my criteria will be, but I think like at least 15 to 20 buyers in the last year that have bought there will make that like a good area to lock up a deal in. And if it's under 10, I think it's probably not something you want to bother with. It's probably maybe too rural, or just get a better discount on that property if you're going to try to lock it up.
hmm
So yeah, there's that. And then also I've actually really enjoyed their like pipeline view. It's very simple, but it has, I do like it. Like they're kind of built in CRM where you can move deals through the stages. Like I'm looking at now, which is searching for buyer, buyers found, assign the deal and close the deal. So you can move your deals through those stages and then you can click into each deal and put notes in for buyers and stuff. So that's been really nice. So yeah, that's my experience so far.
Thanks. Yeah, I've had similar experience. I mean, I'm not as hands-on with it as you are, Jasper, because my dispo team uses it, but I've used it for both things. I've used it when we're analyzing a deal or when my acquisitions person will ask me, "Hey, can you review this deal? I'm not sure about the comps or whatever." You know, I mean, they're using my acquisitions person's using investor base, but sometimes I'm using it too just to go in and see, like, hey, do we have this priced right? We are making the proper offer here because you can look on the acquisition side and see what people are paying pretty easily, and you can also see what people are paying flippers versus buy and hold, right? So if you're on a deal where you're not going to be able to get a wholesale price out of the seller at this stage, they're too committed to it's move-in ready or it doesn't need much, right? But you might get
Mhm.
a buy and hold investor there. So if you can find half a dozen buy and hold investors in that area, maybe one of those people would buy it below market but not at wholesale price, right? So
Yeah.
that's a cool feature. And then we're adding more buyers to our list in the last couple of weeks since we've had investor base because it is so easy. You go in there and same deal, Jasper. A lot of them are new people that we don't know, and we're just reaching out to them and being like, hey, are you interested in this deal in particular, or are you interested in deals in this area? And we've been adding a number of buyers each week from InvestorBase to our
Yeah.
list. So, I'm, yeah, 2 thumbs up for me so far on that. The other one was SMS, and just checking in about any trends in SMS for you, Jasper, anything new or anything you're learning?
Yeah, I've been noticing the response rate is pretty consistent for me. I've been noticing that my oldest account in launch control, I do have 3 now. My oldest account has taken a hit. And I think that's largely because what we talked about offline, which is that when I upload new data, half or more is already in the system because I've had this account for about 2 years now. And so I pretty much have like a lot of the counties that I market in already in there in terms of data. And so that account has taken a hit. So it's led me to consider either shutting it down entirely or downgrading to the lowest level and just like focusing on the drip campaigns in that one and possibly opening a brand new account, because my brand new account and then my second oldest account are doing fantastic, with the newest account doing the best. And that's because, like what Matt shares, data is the most important when you're marketing. And so when I'm able to add fresh data and I'm able to market to 90 or 100% of that list, as opposed to 40 or 50% with my older account, then I'm getting a much better response rate. So, duh. But obviously I can't just keep, popping up new accounts all the time, but maybe once a year, I do need to shut down an old account and open a new one to keep response rate, because I'm just looking at the stats here. And for my newest account, we're at 15% response rate, and my oldest account is at 9. So that's a huge difference. That's almost double. So when you look at that, it probably does make sense for me to pretty soon shut down that old one and open a new one. Or maybe just transfer, because I have that on the oldest one is on the high tier and this is on the low tier. So maybe just transfer and then put all my focus on this newer account. So yeah, I'm thinking about doing that. But overall, like I said, the second oldest and the newest are doing very well in terms of response rate. We're still getting leads from the other ones, just lower response rate. But I'm happy to be at 14 and 15 for my other 2 accounts for response rate, which is great for me. Last year when SMS was awesome, I was at about 19 or 20. So seeing about 15 is really good. I'm almost creeping back up to that level of last year. So that's exciting.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did what you're suggesting, is we took almost the same thing. We took our launch control, and the only thing our old original launch control account is doing is follow-ups. It's just follow-ups that are already in there. And that's all we do, just, do the follow-up campaigns and respond to answers there. And so it's automated. So you get whatever, a handful of responses every day. And that's what that's for. And we're still pushing leads to the CRM from that account, which is great. And then we have a newer, well, actually our Smarter Contact account is older now, relatively, account. And that's where we've been focusing our energy, and we upgraded that to a higher tier Smarter Contact. So our response rates dropped off. So I've been working with that over the last couple of weeks, just trying to figure it out. We've tried changing phone numbers to see if fresh phone numbers would help. We've tried changing our templates a little bit. And our next thing will be to change our list company, just to see if we get some slightly different data. Matt Larson used an example in one of our masterminds recently of, he had a guy who was in his program was like, I want to do the same list you're doing in the same counties you're doing. And so they did the same list, same companies, same counties Matt was doing, and they got totally different leads. They had barely any overlap. So
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, like, maybe if we do some different list companies, same counties, we might get different lists and different people that we're connecting with. So we're going to try working on that. But we were in that 15% range, that really happy zone, for a while. And now we've dropped down. And this past week, we were a little over 10 overall across multiple campaigns. So we definitely need to do something. And the lists are probably what we'll start with. But I was sharing with you offline, Jasper, that the national DNC list is eating up over half of our data that we're uploading to Smarter Contact. So they they filter for litigators, duplicates, and the national DNC list. And the national DNC has been over 50% of what they're taking out. And then some are there's a big chunk of unverified numbers, which is like landlines or numbers that have been canceled. Pardon me. I think I need to get a drink really quickly. Water bottles. Yeah, but I think that's it for SMS. Our response rate's really high in there. We're still, I thought I had it open. So I get closed out, but our response rate's in the 80s. It's in the a nice range.
Yeah.
As long as you're above 75%, you're usually pretty good with response rate. And so then I just wanted to hear from you, Jasper, if you don't mind, just touch on the buy box thing that we talked briefly about. I think that's a good, like with wholesalers, we don't always think of ourselves in terms of having a buy box. Like a lot of the builders or the flippers will be like, here's my buy box. I do 3+2s built after 1970 in the price range of 250 to 350, you know, whatever. But we don't do that for ourselves. But maybe it's time for us to think about that too, of like what are we buying? Where's our sweet spot, and what are we saying no to? And if we define that buy box, then
Yeah.
you know, that could make our jobs easier. So do you mind just speaking to what you were talking about with it?
Definitely. Yeah. So I haven't solidified mine yet. I want to do that this coming week. So next week, I'll have that as an action item for myself. And next week I'll share. But just brainstorming. And like I said, I was talking to Chris this week, and, he's very strict on his buy box. And for anyone listening, he's one of the biggest buyers in our area and has been for a long time. And he's very strict on his buy box. And so, it's interesting correlation that one of the most successful people is very strict on their buy box. And so, for me, like you said, it's something where it's kind of been an afterthought for me, because as a wholesaler, it's just like, oh, well, maybe like I'm just the garbage disposal, I'll just take anything and I'll just see if I can sell it. Like that's been my approach in the past. Like we'll just take it and we'll just see if we can sell it. And sometimes if you're like 50-50 on a deal, you're having a slow month, do it. Like take on a deal where you might not be 100% certain on it. But I'm at the point now, and I think you are too, where we're kind of overwhelmed with leads and stuff. And for us to bring in a deal where we're 50-50 on, just doesn't even make sense, because we have so many opportunities that we just kind of want to toss those to the side. And I don't want to say trash them, but just put them in follow up for later on, maybe if we're in a slow season. And for now, just focus on the best opportunities that are going to make us the most money. So for me, I think I'm going to focus on, I know Chris does 1960s or newer. I think I might do 1950s or newer, because I've still had, good luck selling those homes. But I do notice that for the older homes prior to 1950, and some people still buy 1940, 1960, but when it's older than 1940, your buyer pool shrinks drastically. And I just noticed that because we contracted one in 1906 this week, and the numbers made sense, but I'm just having trouble selling it. And some people, they want to take on that project and they want to post it on Facebook because they restored like a historical house. But that's kind of a small subset of buyers, especially when you're dealing with these professional buyers who flip 50, 100 homes a year. They don't want to be bogged down with permitting and dealing with a foundation. And you have to redo everything when you do a house that old.
The electrical could be weird. Yeah, the
Yeah,
plumbing could be cast iron plumbing. Yeah, you don't
yeah,
know what you're going to get into.
yeah,
Probably have to redo the insulation. Yeah.
yeah. And so, obviously I have closed deals like that and I made good profit on some older deals. But I think as a general rule for myself, it's got to be either a home run deal where like I'm projected to make 50,000 on it. Because then I think if I'm projected to make that much on an older house, I might end up making half or less.
Yeah.
So it's either got to be a home run or it's got to be in like Raleigh, Durham, because in those areas, people are probably gonna take a leap on those because it's just such a hot market.
Because it's
But
going to sell.
overall, yeah, overall, I think I'm just going to avoid those older ones, and I'm going to definitely avoid the properties, like I mentioned, that are more rural and don't have much investor activity nearby. Like sometimes when a deal is hard to comp, I'll just look at the tax value and I'm like, oh, well, if we can get it under tax value, we could probably sell it, but it doesn't really work that way sometimes. And so I think in general, my buy box is going to be probably 1940, 1950 or newer. So I'm still going to solidify that. And it's going to be at least 3 bed, because a lot of times when we get a 2 bed house, they just sit there, they do not move. Because you gotta, one thing I'm just realizing, finally after 5 or 6 years, is like I gotta look through this as a lens as would I buy it, because I've bought a few more properties myself lately. And when I'm looking at some of these wholesale deals we have on the board, I'm like, yeah, I definitely wouldn't buy that, but I'm trying to pawn it off with someone else. So it doesn't really make sense, to think through that. Like I would definitely not buy this, but let me see if I could sell it to someone else. Like that doesn't really make sense. And so I'm kind of just thinking through that lens. So I want to have minimum 3 bed, want to be newer build, 1940, 1950, or possibly newer. and just want to be in an area where there's investor activity, where you have no problem finding at least 5 comps in the last 6 months that have sold on the market. Because for me, when I'm putting together my email blast, that's the criteria that I give to my guy, is that we need to have 5 comps listed here. We can list more, but we need to have at least 5 comps that have sold in the last 6 months that are flipped on the market. So if we can't do that, then let's not even take the deal, because that means no one's really interested in that area. So
Yeah, and it makes it so much harder to market and sell when you can't really prove what it might sell for when it's
yeah,
fixed up. Yeah,
yeah,
because it could, a lot of those deals, there's a range. It's like, oh, this could sell for 110 or it could sell for 210. I don't know, because
yeah,
it's just like, because their comps are all over the map and they're all older comps and stuff. Yeah,
yeah. And if your range is that big, it becomes much harder to sell.
yeah.
And so yeah, those are general parameters I'm thinking through, and then I'm still juggling with this last one, but I think I might, at least for the next quarter, we're going into Q3. I think I might put a focus on 0 tenant occupied deals for Q3,
That's what I thought you
and
were going
see
to
how
say.
it
Yeah.
goes. I might just see how it goes.
I'm not even telling my tenant story this week, but it involves broken windows. It involves tenants
Oh
coming back
god.
and smashing windows after they moved out. So
Oh my gosh.
that's all I'll say.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think I'm gonna do that at least for July, month one. And if we get like 0 contracts, then I might edit it. But I think I'm gonna put a focus on vacant homes and owner occupied homes, no tenants, for the next quarter, and see how it goes. So that's in general, those are my thoughts. So I don't know if you want to share your thoughts on yours.
No, I appreciate you covering that. That was something you brought to the table that I'm really glad you did, because I want to look at that for us too. What we actually want to get into and what we don't, because that when you get those 20 properties or more in dispo and you're like, oh my God, we can't manage all these properties. It's like, well, what's really in here and
Yeah.
what do we, and then it's tightening the parameters on the acquisition side, right? So we don't end up with that. So
Hmm.
I think it's a really good point and something I want to employ as well. The
Yeah.
last thing I was going to touch on briefly is something you mentioned offline too, Jasper, and then we'll wrap it up. But you just talked about the market trend, and this is of course just our market, but and feel free to feedback if you are experiencing stuff in your market wherever you are in the country too. But it seems like people predicted a slowdown because of interest rates and everything, and it hasn't really been apparent to us over the last few months, but then just over the last month or two, it seems to be more apparent, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a little bit more of a slowdown. And you were just speaking to that at the top, that you were talking with, again, Chris, this guy we both know who's buys a lot of properties and does single family stuff, that he was noticing a slowdown. And I think Jasper, you and I both bought a property recently,
Yeah.
and we're primarily wholesalers, but we do buy sometimes. And we've noticed the market being slow on those. So um, you mind touching on that just briefly?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a good point you shared, because I'm grateful, even though I'm not going to make a big profit on this deal. I'm grateful I bought it, because it's a good learning experience for myself to be on the other side, because I'm primarily wholesaling. 95% of my deals I just wholesale. I don't actually take title. And so it's a good learning experience. And I think even though it wasn't the best experience on this one, I think I'm going to try to at least buy one a quarter, if not more, because then I can kind of have a pulse on the market that I'm working in better than I can when I'm just wholesaling. Because obviously I can see how many offers I'm getting from buyers and stuff, and that's indicative. But when you're actually on the market and you're seeing like, oh, wow, like we had 20 showings this week and 0 offers. Wow. Like
Mhm.
this market is really slowing down,
Yeah.
Um,
People can't afford houses the way they used to because the
yeah.
interest rates are higher. Yeah.
Yeah. And so yeah, so I think for anyone, if you have the means and if you get a good deal, I think it's worth, buying a couple, maybe not one a quarter if you're just starting out, but maybe just buy one per year, and then you can kind of get an idea of what the market looks like when you actually list something. But yeah, talking to Chris again, I'm using his name a lot. I won't use his full name, but um, he probably has anywhere from 20 to 30 properties on the market at any given time. He's just a really big, high volume flipper. And he shared with me that he's price dropping like every single week on all of his deals, and they're still sitting there. And he said for some deals, he's price dropped 10 plus times and they still haven't sold. And and he shared with me just a story on one deal specifically, where he had a buyer come through and they made an offer, but they were like, "We'll make you this offer, but we need 10,000 in seller paid closing costs," which means like the buyer gives a seller a $10,000 credit towards closing costs, which closing costs don't even cost $10,000. But either way, Either way, and he was like, no, I'll give you 7,500. And they were like, no, they just walked. And he was just
Wow.
like, oh my God, like, like what the heck? Like some of these retail buyers just aren't willing to negotiate. They're just like, this is what I'm doing, or no, I'm just moving on to the next deal. And so I think it maybe comes from a point of just people just aren't as excited to get into homes now because the interest rates are so high. So they're like, well, I'll just keep looking, you know, because interest rates are going to come down. That's what everyone thinks, right? Interest rates are going to come down. I'll just keep looking. So I think we're kind of in that weird limbo place where like people are waiting for the election, waiting for interest rates to come down, hopefully. But who knows? Because, you know, I was talking to my uncle Chris, this was a long time ago, and this was back in 2 years ago. And he was sharing with me that his mom, you know, my grandma who passed, she got into her first home at 18%. And the mortgage is 18%. And so, you know, who's to say we might not go back to that? Hopefully not, but we might go over 10%. And so, you know, at that point, who knows what the market will look like? But I think for right now, a lot of people are waiting for them to come back down to 4, 3, 2, like they were just 2 years ago, and they're up at like 6 or
It
7
might
now.
never happen. Yeah. Or
It
not
might
happen
not
for a
ever
long
happen.
time.
Yeah, it might
Yeah.
not ever happen. But yeah, I've definitely noticed. Anyone who's listening, you could chime in what market you're in, what it's looking like. But in North Carolina, it's specifically like the last month to 2 months have really shifted a little bit. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback briefly on it because I'll just touch on specifically the deal that we did. So we uh, we found this house and we thought it was a slam dunk, big profit deal, right? So we got into it for around 140, and Zillow at the time, the Zestimate was 200, and we looked at the comps around, and it was like, oh yeah, the houses are selling for, 180 to 220 around here, so that's valid. And so we bought this thing subject to, and we won't get into that, but I guess we could do subject to breakdowns another time. Bought the thing subject to, we're into it for 140. So we list it for 199, and it's pretty much a lipstick remodel. It doesn't need much, like some paint and touch ups, but um, and then nothing, crickets, like a couple of showings. And so we've had it for, I don't know, close to 2 months now, maybe. And then we dropped it to one, we've been dropping it by 10. And the interesting thing is that the Zestimate, not that that's gospel, but the Zestimate is dropping. So I'm
Yeah,
also dropping in response to the Zestimate because everybody who buys houses looks at the Zestimate, right? I mean,
yeah.
that's the retail buyers. So I'm like, well, I can't have my asking price above the Zestimate. And the Zestimate went from 199 when we got this thing a couple months ago to now it's at like 172, right? And that's just the Zestimate. So they're tracking, and again, like Zillow's not gospel, but they're tracking market trends with their algorithm. So for some reason, 2 months ago they thought this thing was worth 200 on the market, and now they think it's worth 170. And
Yeah.
so now we're at 169, and that's just kind of our experience with one individual property. And we still have had very weak showings, just like one or two showings a week or something like that, and very little inquiry. But then it's weird too because you look on Zillow, and Zillow will have like the number of views and the number of saves, and they're like thousands of views and like double digit saves, like in the 50, 60, 70, 80 people have saved it,
Uh,
but we haven't had many showings at all. So it's just interesting to watch. And again, I thought based on, it was like we were doing deals and it was like, oh, well, interest rates have gone up, but the market hasn't really slowed down. But maybe it just took a little bit of time to percolate through the market. And now we're
yeah,
really feeling it.
yeah,
So anyway, just
definitely.
wanted to check in on that.
Yeah, and it's funny what you shared about this estimate because I noticed the same exact thing. So they must be tracking like on market trend as well because the property that I just bought, I shared the numbers. I don't know if I shared it online, but either way, we bought it and we were hoping to get like 110 on the market. And this estimate literally before we listed it was I think 140, 150, somewhere around there. And like the day or two after we listed it, it dropped down to like 120. And I was like, that's interesting. Just because we listed for 110. And so I think that hurts us in some way because a lot of buyers do look at that. And so
Yeah.
it's interesting. It's interesting that Zillow kind of either they track your list price or they track the activity or something. But the estimate dropped way down on mine, and I think now it's at like 115 for the property, and it was just like 150. So it's interesting. But
Yeah. But then it's weird because so many people, retail buyers, that's their benchmark. That's what they go by for value.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, that's a good point though. But for anyone listening, definitely don't be scared with like this information because you can wholesale in any market because we have very little risk. one thing I would say that you touched on earlier is to not stray from your process and don't put down like due diligence or non-refundable money, especially during this market right now. It's a mistake that I recently made as well. I put down $1,000 and we're probably going to lose that. So that was a mistake, and it's something that I hardly ever do. I usually have $100 on there and it's completely refundable up until the day of closing. But on this specific property, I put down 1,000 and it's probably not going to come back to me. So just make sure for anyone listening, especially in this time right now, the market might be slowing. Just, stick to your guns and keep wholesaling, because a lot of people might drop out, but just don't put down non-refundable and make sure you have time to back out before your contract's up. So
Yeah. And mine, like us giving them 15 days. I mean, we can't do 15 days,
yeah.
That was just stupid. It was stupid for me to agree to that, but
Yeah.
yeah. So there's $1,500 in lessons that we're sharing right now.
Yeah. Definitely.
Make your EMD refundable right up to closing. And if people don't
Yeah.
want to do it, that's okay. You can just say that's the way we do business, and it's you might lose a deal or two, but
Yeah.
it's probably, I guess it's still worth it. I mean, I guess I thought it was worth it to do this because I thought we were going to have a slam dunk, but there are very few slam dunks.
Yeah. But as we're experiencing this slowdown on our end, as wholesalers and investors, we're on the front lines. So if these trends stay the same and if the election doesn't change anything drastically, I think in about 6 months, sellers' prices are going to start to come down drastically, because they tend to follow way behind, investors. But I think if these trends continue and houses just keep sitting on the market, then sellers are going to realize, and we're going to start to get even better deals. So I'm hopeful for that, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, there's this illusion that sellers have that we've all created because so many wholesalers are coming into the market now, and all these cold callers and SMS and stuff. So now
Yeah.
people think their property's worth a ton and something really special because they're just getting so many people reaching out to them. And
Yeah.
I don't know if this is going to change, when it's going to change, if people just keep coming in like, oh, I'm going to wholesale, I'm going to make money. And it's great. Like, but I think, what's the statistic? Like 80% of people who buy a course never do a deal, stuff
Yeah.
like that. So it's like 90% of these people who come in and send out a list or make some cold calls or do an SMS campaign don't end up buying anything, but it gives the sellers an illusion that their property is really in high demand and really
Definitely.
special. And
Yeah.
we run into that all the time now. And even 2 years ago, we didn't run into that so much. Like people were happy to talk to you about their property. They're happy to receive your offer and sign a contract. And now it's like, oh, I'm getting 10 calls a day on this thing. And they're
Yeah.
putting in a new highway over there and there's a new Hardee's going in over here. And, whatever it
Yeah.
is, it's always something.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what to do about that, but it's just kind of funny.
Yeah,
Shall
it is funny.
shall we wrap it up?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's it. I think that was a good breakdown. Hopefully for anyone listening, that was valuable. Got some value from some of the topics we shared today.
Yeah. If you get value, give us a like or a comment. Let us know what you want to hear more of, and we'll keep trying to bring value. I've got the James Clear thing opened here. So we both subscribe to James Clear's newsletter. He's the guy who wrote Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
He sends out a weekly newsletter. Um, so I'll read something from this to close. I'm pausing because this is such a long one.
Yeah.
I'll go with the 3 ideas. Move toward the next thing, not away from the last thing. Same direction, completely different energy.
Mhm.
Guilt lives in the past, worry lives in the future, peace lives in the present. And then the third thought is mastery requires lots of practice, but the more you practice something, the more boring and routine it becomes. Thus, an essential component of mastery is the ability to maintain your enthusiasm. The master continues to find the fundamentals interesting. And then I'm just read this one quote because it's kind of novelist and poet Robert Louis Stevenson on the shortness of life. Old and young, we are all on our last cruise.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, we'll wrap it up. Thanks for listening if you're listening, and hope you have a great week.
Yeah.